Welcome to Transform Now, a podcast focused on intelligent automation and brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. On this program, we talk about how organizations globally are rethinking the way they operate, utilizing process orchestration and AI-enabled digital workers to free up humans to do the work that matters most. We also share insights and tips on how you can embrace this new way of working and unleash your full potential. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to our weekly Pulse Check, where we look at some of the most interesting news items in the area of automation and AI. I'm Brad Hairston.
I'm Michael Marchuk.
And we have a lot to talk about today. Michael, I thought we would start by talking about the announcement this week from OpenAI
Big
and
news.
Google, because we talked about what was happening there on the last Pulse Check. And with regard to OpenAI, so there was a lot of rumors circulating that they were going to announce a Gen AI enabled search engine, which would have been huge because that's first time anyone's done that, and maybe this takes on Google head on. They did not, in fact, announce that as people predicted. Instead, what they did was they released their latest version of ChatGPT, and it's ChatGPT 4.0, which is interesting.
I love the O. It's not 4.0, it's 4.0.
4.0, little lowercase o, which they say is stands for Omni, whatever that means.
It just means that they wanted to be cool.
And GPT 4.0 improves upon ChatGPT's capabilities across text, voice, and vision. Now, they also hint that video is coming not too far down the road. But if you look at what they're doing now with text, voice, and vision, it is pretty interesting. There's a hard push in the direction of multimodal AI. And Michael, I know you took a look at the video, the demos they have on their website showing
Scary cool. I encourage everyone to kind of poke their eyes out there and check it out, because it's if you've seen the movie Her, it's very, very reminiscent of that.
Very reminiscent.
In a very kind of scary way. The emotive capabilities of the voice that it's used, and the way that they approach even the humor was uncanny and kind of unsettling.
Completely. So a lot to look forward to there. Of course, this is going to be available to the free ChatGPT users as well, although they said they're going to have constraints on how much you use these new multimodal capabilities. One other thing that ChatGPT 4.0 will allow is for you to upload files for assistance in summarizing, writing, or analyzing. So I think that's really one of the most fascinating additions to what it can do today. So we'll look forward to seeing what that looks like.
They'll also use that as a way to train their AI even more, as you now feed it content that you are actually permitting it to use and have access to.
Exactly.
Which I know is one of our news stories a little later on today.
Yes. So that happened on the 13th. On the 14th, Google made some announcements of their own around their Gemini product, and suffice it to say, it's in the same direction. Multimodal, more vision, more voice integration, things like that. I think the response to the Google announcements has also been very positive, although there's still a heavy level of skepticism given the way they stubbed their toe on their last
time they tried this out.
Yeah. I mean, using a demo video that turned out to be mostly
vaporware,
smoke and mirrors. Yeah,
exactly.
So we'll see what happens there with Google. But anyway, just wanted to touch on that briefly. So let's talk about the other news items that we wanted to focus on today. The first one comes from Vox, VOX, and it's titled, "What a Zoom Cashier 8,000 Miles Away Can Tell Us About the Future of Work." Now, this is a pretty I would say, negative viewpoint on automation and AI in general. But the way I would summarize it, and Michael, I know you've read it, so I want to get your thoughts, but the way I would summarize it is this person who wrote the article, her name is Wizzy Kim. Wizzy, that's a great name.
Is it DJ Wizzy Kim?
Not a DJ. She might be a DJ. She's making the case that with automation, with AI, with all the technological advancement, it's positioning companies to actually do more offshore labor arbitrage, but do it in ways where they're leveraging the cheapest human labor conceivable. And she uses an example of a restaurant in New York where you actually go to a Zoom site to order, and you're talking to a cashier that is in the Philippines that is paid $1 an hour. And once the order's made, then the kitchen there in New York City, gives you a meal. And so she's used, that's a pretty extreme example, but she does cite 4, 5, 6 other examples of companies that have used very, very, very low dollar human labor to augment what they're doing with advanced or emerging technology. And so she's basically saying all these advancements are not necessarily good for all humans. Maybe it's good for us, those in the West that are taking advantage of it. But companies now are using these labor pools all over the world to make it all work, whether that's taking orders or it's people that are tagging data for large language models, which we know is a very manually intensive effort. So that's all I'll say about it. Michael, what are your thoughts?
Well, like that TV program, that was your point. Well, I have a counterpoint to that. So I look at it slightly differently. And her point was identifying the fact that as the employers are trying to scramble to adopt the AI technologies, some of them are not really ready yet. We've seen this a couple of times. You mentioned this Zoom, cashier. They also talked about the Amazon stores, the Amazon Go stores, where you go in and the cameras are supposed to know exactly what you've taken and do everything automatically. When we found out that, in fact, there's a bunch of folks that were offshore in India that were actually watching the cameras and validating the purchases. So what they were doing is basically a mechanical Turk. They pretended like they had AI because they weren't ready for AI yet, or they didn't have all the functions of AI yet. And to your point, I think there's this gap time where it's either fully human or fully automated on both sides of that gap. But in the middle there's going to be this squishy inside where the functions aren't quite there yet, but they're developing. And during that time, there's going to be the need to have very low cost labor to make it appear as though the AI is working perfectly. And there's nothing wrong with making that gap, filling that gap with people. The challenge, as you mentioned, though, is that that transactional nature of the activities is often done at the lowest cost, which generally means we go find the poorest countries in the world and try to leverage their labor for some short period of time until they can be made obsolete with a technology, because in fact they are a gap filler. So there's a challenge here. So when you come to that stage where the gap has been filled, there's it gets back to the whole democratization of AI and technology in general. I think we're going to see that those same folks who are working for $1 an hour can now still leverage the same tools that you and I can here in America. They can in the Philippines and Kazakhstan or wherever they're going to be, that they're getting paid $1 an hour. They'll now be able to use the same tools that we do. So that levels the playing field out quite a bit. So those same folks will have the same opportunity that we do.
My counterpoint to the article is, I think we've seen, even with some of our customers, that there's a bigger trend of bringing back some of those offshored, especially in the back office, HR, finance, areas like that, bringing some of those offshored, outsourced operations back in-house with the help of digital labor. So instead of more offshore labor arbitrage, potentially there's going to be less in the future as companies realize they can use digital labor to do a lot of those functions in-house, to reduce their cost and improve quality and things like that. So, Michael, our next article comes from the Associated Press, and it reads, 8 U.S. newspapers sue ChatGPT maker OpenAI and Microsoft for copyright infringement. Now, you've really delved into this area quite a bit.
Yes,
I know you
I
had
did.
an IP expert on the podcast to talk about this. So, as you read this about these 8 newspapers, what was your reaction?
Oh, a couple things. All right. My first reaction was in quite literally the very first sentence, they used the word purloining when they said that the companies have been purloining millions of copyright articles. And I had to look that up because I don't use that word in my everyday vernacular. So purloining, for those of you who want to go out to the dictionary.com, means to steal. But to that point, they are accurate in that the news articles that are made available for free were used to train OpenAI, and I'm sure many other models out there because they were readily accessible, publicly available. And this is the challenge we have with understanding where the training model and the data access are conflicting with copyright laws, either here in this country in America or across the world, because those articles may be available to folks in every country. And so by accessing them from anywhere, there's an implied public use kind of concept. But to their point here, they're spending a lot of money for all these reporters to create good articles that have factual information in them, that have grammatically perfect kind of wording. And these models are then grasping from that and training themselves on that kind of concept. So there is a very fine line that is still not worked out within the legal systems anywhere at this point as to how to approach this kind of concept. So I suspect this will eventually be worked out, but to this point, I don't think this is going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, the article mentions that the Associated Press last year agreed to a partnership with OpenAI, in which OpenAI is actually paying them an undisclosed fee to be able to license their archive of news stories. So perhaps it could go that way. I'm assuming OpenAI will fight this with every lawyer they can hire and keep it in the courts for a while. So we may not hear, a resolution to this specific suit, but it'll be a fun one to track.
Yeah.
Our last article comes from Euromoney, and it reads, FX, why it's bad to confuse AI with automation. Now, this was a really interesting and pretty intellectual article, I thought. And it's talking about the blurring of the lines in foreign exchange between automation, traditional AI, and Gen AI, and how all of that is, in the opinion of this author, it's increasing the risk in the foreign exchange area. It's setting unrealistic expectations. And I read this one a couple of times just to make sure I was getting the gist of it. Let me read one quote because I think it'll help. This gentleman that they quoted, he's from HSBC, and he's quoted as saying, many businesses are finding it a challenge to include Gen AI technology in automated systems in which a high level of reliability is needed. And coupled with the challenges of managing model risk, this has prevented it from having a large practical impact on FX markets. So, and he goes, there's another part in the article where this same individual says traditional AI is more suited to FX trading operations than generative, because you really don't want that creative aspect of generative AI. You don't want something that's highly creative, but possibly slightly off center or, needs to be verified or validated over and over again. So I think it's an interesting perspective. But to me, the article is very much about, hey, generative AI is great unto itself. Keep it away from FX. What were your thoughts?
So I guess I would kind of back it out of, I appreciate this article was on FX, but I believe it applies to a whole lot of other things.
Mm-hmm.
When we start talking about the way that AI is applied, AI, we consider narrow AI rather than maybe generative AI. Narrow AI is an algorithm that leverages data endpoints that gives some kind of confidence level to make decisions on. Whatever that's a very generic way of describing it. So when you apply that in a very narrow way, you're likely to have more predictable outputs from those kind of models because of the way they're designed and the way the algorithm performs. So within a monetary situation, or perhaps even through optical character recognition or voice recognition and whatnot, leveraging the capabilities of that narrow AI to be able to understand the data that's being input, run through its algorithm to give some kind of confidence level for the output, certainly makes a lot more sense, because we don't need to necessarily generate something as much as we need to identify or interpret something, right? So given his stance, I also believe he takes, the name of this article here is why it's bad to confuse AI with automation. So what he's telling in some parts here is confusing two different types of AI, generative AI and more narrow AI. And then when you throw automation into the mix here in terms of providing action based on those decisions or the outputs of the narrow AI or the generative AI, those actions then really are the automation components. What's happening? It's the doing part. Yeah. So whether you're gathering data to feed into the narrow AI or the generative AI, or the actions being taken based on those outputs, that's where we start looking at the differentiation between AI and automation, as we build that out. So he has a number of different kind of nuances in this article, but I think his point is valid, which is if you don't have a need for specific things to be created or guessed at, and you really want to have something that's a little more predictable, using a narrow AI is likely a better choice.
Yeah. And the article was, in my opinion, very favorable toward automation. It mentions the opportunity to leverage automation more.
Right.
But in the AI area, it's definitely favorable toward more deterministic models or traditional AI versus creative. And it does make the point that, Gen AI doesn't always produce the same answer. And that's not great when you're dealing with foreign exchange. You need certainty. You need it to be more business rule driven. So I think we've talked with this one to death. But it's
I would add one more piece to that, is that even optical character recognition for, like I said, a deterministic model, your computer does not need to create a whole new alphabet based on the language that's reading. You just want it to know what it says. So there's a reason why you use specific AI and why you can leverage automation to be able to take action on it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's all we've got time for today. Remember, we produce a great podcast with an incredible guest every week. So if you're not already subscribing to Transform Now, make it happen. Thanks again for being here. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of intelligent automation, subscribe now. The future of work is here.